Okay, I think we're live now. So, welcome to our third live recording here on Zoom. Hope it's all working properly. I think we're getting into our stride a little bit now. And today I wanted to spend some time just to talk you through our principles of design. These are our, um, actually, I'll just double check that we are recording. I've got paranoid about that now. I'll just double check that first. Let's head over to the live. Yep, I can see we are live at the moment. So let's go with the flow. Sorry for that slight detour. So yeah, today we're going to be talking through principles of design. It's quite a dry topic, but it's one that a lot of designers will cover in university and then kind of, when I say forget about it, they'll have these embedded into their psyche as part of the design process. But if you're coming into a role where you need to design professionally and you haven't got this background, then this, I think, will help you an awful lot. What we've done is we've taken standard principles of design, things like white space, hierarchy, and balance, and we've created our own playful versions of them. So white space has now become spaceman, let him breathe. Hierarchy of content or prioritization is now Spotlight. There's only one star of the show, the rest is the supporting cast. And what we're going to be doing is I'm going to take you through a presentation that I put together when I'm delivering it in schools, colleges, and universities, and also for some business groups in my local area in Mid Wales as well. And we found that these actually work in primary school level as well, and that's what they were originally built for. And then I realized that they're quite adaptable and playful even for adults as well. And it's a way of taking a very dry subject like principles of design and make it a little bit more playful, a little bit more fun, and hopefully more memorable as well. So let's just share screen and I'll take you through about 10-15 minutes of this session. I'll take you through our uh, formal presentation where I'll go through all of the slide deck that I put together. And then once we've done that, I will then jump across and we're going to have a play in Squarespace and build layouts with these principles in mind. I will explain some of the things to avoid, where the problems could lie, etc., etc. So let's share screen and yeah, I'll share the entire desktop. Okay. So I'm just going to move this bar out the way. It always seems to find its way the Zoom bar always seems to find its way into where I'm trying to work on. And we're going to come back to this in a moment, but this, if you've seen episode 2, this is the website we use, which is just a standard Squarespace template. We adapted some of the colors, some of the effects, and we added some custom code, things like these dotted lines here, and this vertical dotted line up here. So those are elements that we added in episode 2. If you're interested about how you can use CSS and custom code in Squarespace, and you're after a beginner's guide, I'd recommend heading over and checking it out. But what we're going to be doing is building some new layouts within this based on the principles of design that we're going to cover. So I'm heading across to Canva where I've got my presentation and I'm going to go into present mode, which should mean hopefully that you'll see this full screen. So the pixel haze principles of design. This is our creative, playful way of demonstrating quite a dull topic, but an essential topic nonetheless. There are so many people building their own websites on website builders like Squarespace, and they don't have a clear understanding of principles of design. And this is where I think you are going wrong if you're struggling to create professional looking websites. Because if you adhere to all of these, your website will look professional by default. Even if it's not going to be award-winning design or cutting edge in any way, it's going to get the right things in the right places and get that balance of content across. So each of these characters relate to a different principle of design, and we're going to be reintroduced to them in just a few moments. Before jumping in, I think I mentioned it at the start of this recording, but we actually used principles of design as a pilot for Pixel Haze Pilots, which is our primary school education platform. So this would be between 7 or 8-year-olds as a starting point to 11-year-olds. And what we tried to do was to make sure that we've got a way of communicating this that's really clear, easy to pick up, and would spark ideas for questions from our students. And the students we worked with in those primary schools, there was one of those sessions where I split it into two. It was a 1 hour workshop, and the first 20 minutes was supposed to be to go through these principles of design and to explain each of them. And the final 40% was to design a poster. But one of the groups were so engrossed in asking questions, follow-up questions about these principles of design, we actually had to flip it around the other way, and we only had 20 minutes to create a poster. So that's where I needed to go back in to run another session, which was absolutely fine, to make sure we went through all the material. But it really threw me how many questions I would get and how this would resonate. So it's one of my, albeit it's not our biggest project that we've undertaken, but it's certainly something we've got a lot of pride in, the fact that this works so well in a rather surprise area. To start off, we'll talk a little bit about branding. So one question I get asked regularly is, what's the difference between a logo and a brand? And whereas the logo is a visual representation of your brand, so I'm wearing an Under Armour t-shirt here, that would be your logo, your emblem that represents the brand. Whilst the brand is so much more than that. It's how it impacts with all of your senses. It's the perception of your business. So whilst you design a logo, you build a brand over time. And that's why some of the biggest brands in the world were built yesterday with the best award-winning designer in the world who's designed a beautiful looking logo, because it goes way beyond that. And I like to think of it as an emotional sledgehammer you get to whack someone with. How does it feel, look, or taste? You're trying to hit all of the senses. And there's always a good example where I use Disneyland, where they pump smells out into the streets in Disneyland to entice people in to buy food, and usually fast food. Again, airports are another really good example, where you get the perfume that's pumped into the air conditioning. I personally don't like it at all, but I know I'm not the target audience. So you get this sickly sweet smell as you're walking through the duty-free sections in an airport. And if we're going to bring it back to home, I'm a huge fan of Lego, as is our entire team at Pixel Haze, just because of the creative, playful nature of it. It's pick it up and have a play around with it. And it's that creative freedom is what really drew me to it as a child, and as a big kid now, playing with it with my own kids as a perfect excuse to get back in and build stuff with Lego. And our approach is we try to be as close to Lego with technology and training as we can be. Colorful, playful, we don't take ourselves too seriously. One of our core values is we never grow up. And whilst that might be off-putting for some of our clients we work with, we generally don't find it, because we're serious enough when it comes to the things that matter, like, for example, the quality of the project that we're delivering. And so therefore, having that balance of the two, we're trying to make sure that our work is if it's creative, if it's playful, it's memorable. And of course, we can get away with that in the industry that we're in, though that be the creative industries. But when it comes to things like getting the website live, making sure our clients has a clear understanding of what to do next once a website's live, or once a brand's being created, logo, should I say, considering logo and brand are two different things, and other aspects as well. And also, of course, when we're pricing for projects, we need to be deadly serious about those. The last thing we want to be doing is messing around, not getting the price point right. So there's a time to be serious, and there's a time not to take yourself too seriously as well. And we always try to balance that tightrope between the two. But generally, it's really easy. Apply a little bit of common sense, and you know the things that you don't mess around with, and the things that you can explore with an inquisitive way and be really creative with. But perception is everything. So your brand is the perception of your business from the outside. So a lot of the time you can't actually fine tune and control how your brand is perceived through just marketing. It needs to be through the actions of your customers. Are they loyal? Will they queue up like at an new Apple store launching? Would there be a queue at midnight the night before for an 8 a.m. opening? Is it the same then for the launch of the next iPhone? I'm picking Apple as one of the most obvious examples. Likewise, Harley Davidson, where you would have a customer tattoo Harley Davidson on their skin. That's crazy when you think of it as a company and as a brand, but that's where brands transcend and the perception of them go beyond building and selling motorcycles or building individual products. So that these are all things that need to be taken into consideration. They become the perception is built by your audience, not you. So what I often suggest is when you create a logo is to have brand guidelines. This is simple color palette, and I'll try and dig out an example in future weeks so I can run through it with you. But we're looking at the font selection, so we're trying to trim down the number of fonts that we use, maybe 2 or 3 at very most. Most brands can get away with a single font. Is that font then accessible and usable across multiple software platforms? Is it, as I said, accessible? Is it easy to read? Easy to understand? Is it dyslexia friendly? Is that a top priority for you? It really depends on your organization, who your audience is, and how you need to communicate with that audience. But once you've got your brand, your logo, you then build your brand guidelines around it. So in this example here, the navy, the yellows are part of our core color palette for our brand. And actually, this is an old slideshow. We've moved away from Hallis, which is this font here, into a new font selection. I just need to update this slide deck because this presentation is probably 2 to 3 years old now. The thing is with branding presentations is they don't change with the weather like other forms of technology where there's always things changing every day. A lot of the guidelines and the principles that we follow in design have been the case for decades, certainly for as long as over 20 years, for as long as I've been in the design industry. So, so whilst our brands evolve from this, it hasn't changed completely, hence why I can get away with showing this today. But here's a quick example of some notes on here. So we use those shortened lines below the title, as shown down here. We used to use the Canvas font, navy and white from our color palette, and the yellow as well. So those are the rules, but then outside of that, we can kind of do what we want within reason. It really depends on how detailed those brand guidelines are. I've worked with brands where we've had 50-page brand guidelines, and that's a real challenge to work through. Okay, so that's given us an idea of how branding and how that clicks, hopefully. Now we can move on to our principles of design and our individual pixel haze characters. So we're going to start off with an old idiom, measure twice, cut once. And this is something that was ingrained in me since I was a child, being brought up on a farm. We were often doing a lot of our own building work, and I was always pottering around making stuff, and that's probably why I'm in the creative industries now. And this is the old saying that was passed down to me is measure twice, cut once. It costs very little time, energy, or money to add a second measurement in, but the moment you've cut that section of timber or steel, you're then having to go back and potentially weld it together, glue it together, or worst case scenario, going out and buying replacement materials, which is just a complete waste, not great for the environment. And if you just measure twice, you can save that extra work and hassle in the background. And it's something that I'm always saying to myself when we're in the planning process of the website. If I'm feeling that we've been through a few different rounds of designs and I'm in a lazy mood, which everyone can be, and I'm thinking of cutting corners, this comes back into the back of my mind just to know that cutting corners early in a project will lead to extra pain at the end. And of course, we want to make sure that our clients are feeling like $1 million. So therefore, we always go back in, get it right. And sometimes that's a bit of extra planning at the start using our website blueprint process, or a little bit of extra prep work for a meeting, for example. Then we move on to the second principle, which is probably our most popular one, which is spaceman. Our astronaut or spaceman is out in space, and when he's got things around him so much, I know this doesn't make sense from a scientific perspective, but bear with me, then he can't breathe, and we need our spaceman to breathe to survive. So therefore, we declutter around him, we give him space to go into. There we are. Here's a better analogy. If our spaceman's bounding around in space between rocks, there's every chance that his canister on his back, his air canister, is going to pop or explode, meaning that he runs out of air. So we need to let him breathe by moving those rocks around him. I'm going to keep this one for future, and to make sure that our spaceman can float in space freely able to breathe. So if we look at this particular slide as an example, we've got our spaceman coming through this kind of portal thing. We can see that there's space around it. There's loads of space on this slide, and people often make the mistake, especially newcomers to design, that they need to fill every aspect of a page for it to be worthwhile. Whilst the opposite is often true. It's about less is more, it's stripped back, it's simplified. So we're looking at spacing between these elements. They don't have to be exactly the same, but there needs to be good breathing space between them so it's not too compact. This then becomes easy to read. We're adding hierarchy then, so we're breaking up and using contrast, which we'll come on to in just a moment, and our colors to separate the areas. So even someone who is colorblind, or if this is printed in black and white, for example, you could still differentiate between the two just by the shades, the contrast. And so, but most importantly is our spaceman in this slide has got space to breathe. Then we move on to our third principle, yin and yang. These are our two aliens, and we're looking at contrast here as well. So I deliberately showed an example here with the navy boots and their navy gloves. You can see by not having enough contrast, we really lose them. Whilst the glove here over top of this portal that they're coming through, that then becomes higher contrast. So as designers, we're often thinking of these offsetting these challenges, compromise throughout the process. How do we make sure that our spaceman's boots and gloves offset against the backdrop? We've got a navy backdrop, we've got navy gloves, and so therefore that alone isn't quite enough contrast. So that was a error deliberately. I suppose it's not an error. It's bad practice deliberately designed into the design as opposed to it being an error. But when we look at where there's areas of high contrast, like for example, between our main heading and our secondary heading and our accent line, we can see them against the backdrop provide high contrast. Likewise, the green and the pink heads of our aliens really pop out of the page compared to the backdrops as well. So whilst we are trying to provide that contrast to provide impact, we do need to be very careful about having colors that are too close to each other in an area where there's just not enough contrast to separate them. It's not completely broken, but it's not great design either. This would be a very quick fix. Out of interest, and I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it, how would you fix this slide? 5 seconds left. Okay. Hopefully you've been shouting at the screen energetically over those last 10 seconds, but just to put you out of your misery, if you can't figure out how you would fix this particular slide, one option would be to have a wider halo or outer glow on this portal section here. So for example, we've got all of the space up here. Because we don't need to worry about the white space up here, there's been no text with it or anything, we can bring the halo right the way out to about here. And then even though that there will still be closer, the boots and the gloves to the navy, but by just bringing that gradient so it's white, sweeping on a wider radius, that will really help to separate it from the backdrop. Other options would be, of course, change the colors of the gloves and the boots so that they don't match the backdrop. So I just did a very crude version here using the color adjustments in Canva just to show how it would look in the green. I think we could pick a better color that better matches our layout, but ultimately maybe brighter colors or contrasting colors to the backdrop would really help. So those are just two ways that we could fix it without doing anything else. Another option, which I wouldn't really like in this example, would be to put a white outline or a lighter outline around our two aliens. It would look a bit heavy-handed, and it wouldn't really be in keeping with the rest of the design, hence why that would be my last choice or last resort. But the do nothing approach in this example, we would leave this the same. would always leave this design just falling short. Okay, we've got our Phantom of the Opera on the stage, and this example, if I don't jump ahead too quickly, is the spotlight. So this is hierarchy or priority of content. And with the spotlight, there's only one star of our show. The rest is the supporting cast. So here, our Phantom is our star of the show. There's actually a spotlight on him. And we can see that the rest of the screen is drawing you towards our Phantom of the Opera. That's the first thing you see, and that's what you're drawn to. So then you go to look for additional information in any design to reinforce it. For example, you look at this first glimpse, it's okay. There's an illustration here of an actor, I think. What's this all about? You then look for additional information, and you may do this consciously, or you probably will do it subconsciously most of the time because we're trained to go and fetch more information to make our illustration front and center make sense. And then we start tying them all together. So there are things that we can do to help with this to draw our viewer to that spotlight. One is the physical spotlight, but the main contrast between our Phantom and the backdrop. Again, we could say that the hand isn't perfect, but I think that's okay in this example because we're trying to get it to blend in. We're drawn into the Phantom of the Opera singing here and the contrast of colors. By reintroducing this color in the accent line and the principal the subheading, that helps to reinforce it, that this all feels part of a set. And the secondary thing that we want to stand out is the title spotlight. But generally, we're drawn towards imagery first. That's why icons often work really well. And then we look for text to reassure us that we're on the right place, we're in the right place, and the image has drawn us in for the right reasons. So this is very much the supporting cast for our star of the show. Hope that makes sense. Consistency is key. So we've got a pirate here with the key on his hand instead of the hook. And here is a really good example of great contrast cutting out against the backdrop and poor use of contrast once again. But what we try to do here is to keep the design consistent as we go through each of the slides. And here I couldn't resist, but we put the key in there as opposed to those short lines that you have on everything else. Normally, to keep this rule intact, we need to make sure it's consistent. However, there is a caveat. If there's a reason to change it from a short line, in this case, the key works quite well to get the message across, then that's a rule we can break. But we're breaking it deliberately as opposed to not adhering to rules or not having any rules in our design, meaning that we end up with an undisciplined mess. So when we're breaking the rules, like this key, I think that works. You may have a different opinion. When we are not following the rules, this hat, I don't think that's very good design. And I think there's something that we could do even by just bringing in that halo effect in this blue color, going off the outside of that circle would be an easy fix and an easy win for that particular design. Once we've got all of the others in place, this then becomes much easier, rhythm and beat. So our rhythm and beat is the flow we get from one design to the next. In this case, the flow from one slide to the next slide. Are they all flowing in the same theme, even though there'll be differences like the colors, the icons, the use of the key in this example? They're subtle differences and they evolve through the process. So we can see that there's an overarching flow. There's a rhythm, there's a beat to what we do. And then finally, this isn't really a principle of design, if I'm being honest, but content is king and it still will be in future as well. I suppose we could add an additional word on this since this was created before ChatGPT was a thing. Oh, sorry, I just got something in my way here. And when that was created, that's a challenge when you're designing and running a live show. Every little detail becomes a big thing. Sorry about that. I think the eye's clear now and we're good to go. So yeah, since AI and ChatGPT, I would say quality content is king. So we need to think about how well that information will resonate with the viewer. What mood is the viewer in when they land on the website? Are they inquisitive? Are they needing something really quick? And some of the best designs will actually cater to all of those by putting in a strong hierarchy. So for example, as we land on our homepage, we could have an essay about who we are and our background to get our viewer up to speed. But what if they came from our YouTube channel and there was a video already available for that option? Or alternatively, we could go plan B, where the homepage becomes a signposting route to saying, are you interested in this? Or does this sound like you and the problems that you're having and the barriers that you need to overcome? If so, here's the perfect page tailored for you in this scenario. Whilst a essay on your homepage is likely to leave most of your audience, unless they're already zoned in completely, frustrated, they'll be mainly frustrated simply because they want to get from A to B as smoothly as possible. And what our job is not to do is to add bumps in the road. We're trying to smooth out that road from A to B. That's where content is king, and that's where great content works really well for the best websites. If you can solve the problem quickly, then there's every chance that someone might stay longer on the site. You solve this problem for me, and the best writers will solve a problem and then highlight an even bigger problem that needs to be solved. And so if we can do that at the same time, for example, we could highlight some of the many issues that could go wrong when you put a new website live. For example, this is what you should do to troubleshoot an issue with a domain name if it's not transferring. I could potentially solve that problem for the viewer within 5 minutes. And it could be something that they spent days trying to solve on their own. That 5-minute fix buys the trust to then say, but surely you want a checklist and to be taught how to go through all of these processes to get your website live. That's where our community comes in. We've got two communities of two different offerings, one for a DIY approach, someone who's happy to roll the sleeves up and to do all of the legwork and don't need guidance. They just need resources as and when they need them so they can move one rung up the ladder. That's our $15 a month website builders community on SKOOL. That's SKOOL with a K. Then we've got our coaching community, where I will actually sit down with any new members joining that community, or myself or a member of my team will, and we will map out a personalized plan to transition them to be better designers, whether they're designing for their own business or looking to launch or grow their career in web design and graphic design. And just by having that personalized pathway written down, sketched out on a chalkboard in our case, usually, will solve many other problems over and above the initial one we highlighted. So what we're trying to do here is to solve the problem that the person came for. So if they're looking to buy a pair of socks, make sure you're putting socks in front of the viewer. But likewise, if they then want to buy a set of socks that all follow a theme, wouldn't it be great to have our Pixelated Principles designs as a set of socks? I think that's a must. Anyway, if we could then upsell a bigger product that solves a bigger problem. For example, your socks have all got holes in them. Okay, we can solve that by selling you a pair of socks right now. But then are your other socks that you got in that pack the same as the ones you got holes in, likely to have holes within 2 or 3 months? If so, we've got a full pack and is a discounted economies of scale rate, meaning that you get a better deal if you buy more socks right now. Likewise, you get a better deal or the best deal possible from myself and our team at Pixel Haze. Yes, you can just consume free content on our YouTube channel or pop onto our website and view blog posts. Yes, you can join for $15 a month and we can provide all of our course content for you in a kind of overarching guiding route that we'd recommend. Or alternatively, we can coach you in a group environment that's not as expensive as one-to-one and where you can meet other people in a similar situation and learn alongside them. Or alternatively, you can go for our premium highest price product, which I haven't even advertised yet, which will be something around $1,000 a month, and I can coach you one-to-one. It really depends on the viewer as they land on the site. That's why to write the right content and for that to be king, we need to have a clear understanding of who our customers are, or if we're an agency or a freelance designer, we need to have a clear understanding who our customers' clients are. We're not writing the content for our clients. If we're writing content, we're not designing websites for our clients. We are designing them for their audience. And that's something that I was too hesitant and too polite in getting that message across when I started out as a designer. Since I've got into my 40s, I think I'm more grouchy than I've ever been before, or at least more comfortable in my own skin. If someone gets offended because I'm providing that type of information, for example, I'm not designing for you, I'm designing for your audience, then they're probably not the right fit, and I'm happy to kind of go separate ways with the client. Thankfully, that it hasn't happened, I don't think, on those grounds for maybe 15, 20 years. So I think by being straight up sometimes and just saying how we approach things and being quite direct can often be very good. Just be nice when you do it. Okay, this slide brings all of those things into focus. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds again and see how many of the principles of design you remember and can relate to in this slide. Just to give you a heads up, primary school kids got them all within about 30 seconds. How many you got so far? 3 seconds. Okay, now I've got to remember. It's been a while since I've done this presentation, so I've got to remember them myself as well. So put my money where my mouth is. So if we start off with measure twice, cut once, you can't create a poster like this without some planning. So this was sketched out. Ken, our lead creative, did all of the illustration for this from the ground up. He started off by, between us, we just sketched this out on the chalkboard to make sure that we've got all of our principles of design incorporated in this slide. This is also now a poster, although it's in portrait mode, I think, that we've got in our studio, just as a reminder to us about the principles of design, and any students who come on placement with us have that gentle reminder as well. So this is mapped out. Then we go on to spaceman. We need to make sure our spaceman can breathe, and we've got the circle surrounding him. So even though there are elements around him, they are faded out, meaning that most of them are in the distance. It still draws focus to it, and that's what brings us on to spotlight. There's only one star of this show, and that's our spaceman. The rest is the supporting cast, so even things like the rockets, the stars, the moon in the background, and our asteroid belt that goes around it. And we've literally drawn a spotlight, including the halo, over top of our spaceman. Also, we've solved the problem of contrast, or yin and yang, with the spaceman by adding this glow on the design. So whereas in the previous design, the gloves and boots would blend in too much with the background, now they're standing out much clearer. Consistency. There is a consistency in the styling here. These colors of the stars are mapping into, or some of them are mapping into these meteors or asteroids in the background. There's an overall tone and color style to it. The consistency of the design between this slide and the others. So even though the format is completely different, it's an illustration as opposed to a slide. And there's no text on here whatsoever. It's all very, very clear. Rhythm and beat, we can see hopefully the flow carrying through in our illustration style, or Ken's illustration style, from start to completion in this presentation. So there's that one as well. So we got rhythm and beat nailed down, and content is king. And even though there's no written content on this, we can see that it's full of content. It's full of information that will tell the story, because at this point of the presentation, we have context. We've seen all of the other slides and we've seen how it knits together. So this is a slide that's assuming that the viewer already knows of the other principles of design so that they can connect the dots in a creative way. What we're doing here is we're giving you the exercise of connecting those dots, hence why I give you the 10 seconds or so earlier, as opposed to just spelling it out. And I think I've got all of them. Measure twice. Yeah, spaceman. Yin and yang. Spotlight. Consistency. Rhythm and beat. And finally, content is king. Phew, done it. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a good idea in terms of where we're at with all of those designs and how we can talk about principles of design in our work. Somewhere hidden away, I've got this slide deck for this as well. But for now, we're going to jump across to Squarespace and have a go at designing it. Just seeing if I've got an example here of how long I've been recording. I really need to get my head around Zoom. The reason I'm a little bit slow on this is because I have been so used to using Google Meet for my meetings that I know my way around Google Meet like the back of my hand. Whilst with Zoom, I used to use it during COVID when I started out, but then I moved to Google Meet because I'm already on the Google platform. But the great thing about Zoom is it's allowing me to record and stream live at the same time, and that works perfectly for this. But you might have to bear with me, hopefully, for the next couple of weeks whilst I get the hang of this, so then we can hit our stride a little bit easier. But also future videos, I think this will be the last 1 hour session I'm going to do for a while. I'm going to try and trim these down and do less in a session, but get more of these out. So being able to stick to one a week by running half-hour live sessions. That's a plan anyway. So let's go to our site and let's add a new page. And first of all, I'll show you how we can break all of these rules. First of all, content is not king in that design because I've just called it test page. So there's a good example of the right content really engaging. If someone was to go into your website and see test page, the likelihood is, unless they've got a very curious mind, they're not going to want to click on it because they're not going to see it helping them too much. So let's, instead of adding a blank section, let's pick a template. Now these should all be professionally designed, but let's go for this one where we've got 2 images in place. Okay, this isn't breaking any rules at the moment. I don't think it's very imaginative. I think it's a little bit messy, but there's none of the principles of design rules that are really being broken here. Let's break it. So I'm going to put some Latin placeholder text. And we'll put 3 in there. This really goes against the grain with me, and it's really painful breaking designs because every fiber of my being now is wanting to fix this straight away. But here's a really good example of how you can really mess up a design. And this is an extreme example, but I've seen some like it. Okay, so let's put that in place and let's put a bit more text in. Okay. There is a severely broken page. Let's break it even one more. Okay. If you're a professional designer, or even if you've just got a good eye for things, you're probably really struggling to look at this right now. What we've got is, and let's put the original design back in so we can check the 2 alongside each other. And we'll add we'll move this blank section up in between. Make that really small. Yeah, so a small divider so we can separate the 2. Okay, so let's talk about what's wrong with this design, and the answer is a lot. First of all, it's just all mushed up as a bit of a mess. There's no consistency here. There's no real hierarchy. Okay, we've got the heading in here, but it's not inviting you in to read more. And I've seen websites built like this. The consistency's all over the place. There's no rhythm and beat. There's no flow from one section to the next. It's just a mess. It's like having 3 different meals all mushed into one without having any control over what goes into those meals. We've got probably too much text here. There's no call to actions. There's no action points next. There's been no appreciation of the quality of content needed for it, because this is literally placeholder text. And we could see ourselves having an extremely high bounce rate if someone was to land on this page. They'd never come back again. So I often say that if a website's solid and it covers all the principles of design, it doesn't have to be amazing to do a good job for small business owners. There is a point, though, however, where the website starts doing more damage than it is good having one. For example, it's damaging your brand by looking like this. You'd be better off not having a website and just using other platforms that are more restrictive over how they look. Like, for example, social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook, adding videos to YouTube, although your graphics are probably going to be a mess if this is what you like. And so therefore, there are things that we need to really sort out. So let's now duplicate this section, move it down. I'm going to get rid of this one because that's the original example and we don't want to stick to the template because we've got too much content for that. And let's fix this design, shall we? Yes, please. Okay, first of all, I'm going to move that image over. And we can see that this is a background image. So that's the first thing we need to get rid of. This amount of text on a background image is just too much to process in one go. There's not enough contrast. The text isn't clear enough. And so we could bring that image in again below, but I think what I'm going to do is just go with the one image, because they don't exactly tell completely different stories. So there isn't really a reason for more than one image to be in place. So just by moving that and then bringing our content in a slight amount, so it doesn't snap to the edge, it comes into the edge of the content section, because this gutter on the left and the same one on the right, unless you snap an image all the way to the edge, will expand and contract depending on our screen size. So we're about middle of the road here. This is on a MacBook Pro, but in quite a high resolution. And so that's why we've got a decent sized gutter on the left there, or margin. But let's break this down and fix this a little bit. Now we could do this, and then we've got a long piece of text there. Bring that up so we've got some spacing that's roughly the same. It doesn't need to be identical, but we want that top and right side to be fairly balanced. But we can, when we're working with headings, bring that margin to be wider, because the bigger the text, the bigger the margin we need for the next section. For example, here, having this spacing, whether it's the line spacing in terms of number of pixels between those lines in a heading one and those in a paragraph, if they were identical, it wouldn't look right. We need to trick the eye. It's like an optical illusion. So the bigger the text, the bigger the gaps between the lines. Therefore, the bigger the gaps between paragraphs or different heading types. So we need to take all of this into account. This is our spaceman. We need to make sure the content breathes, but also consistency is key as well. We're ensuring that there's consistency through the design. And so that to fix the next inconsistency, we had our text aligned to the center for the heading, but yet for the subheadings and the paragraphs, it was aligned to the left. So why on earth would we want it in the center there? Okay, so that's fixed all of the glaring issues. I still think there's too much text here. I think that would be a hard read for someone landing on the homepage for the first time. I'd also bring this down. So that call to action is really easy to clear and easy to read. But now if we compare it to this section, we'll save, jump out of edit mode and just go into preview mode for a minute. That's a complete mess and terrible. That's not amazing, but it's certainly better, but it's trying to do too much. And because we're having to extend the height of this image to go alongside the text, you can see it's got really fuzzy and grainy simply because of the size of the image now. We're having to zoom in too much. So let's find ways of fixing that. I'm going to duplicate this text area. And I'm going to bring it over here. But before you say, isn't that the problem in the first place? We can't see the text clear enough. You'd be right. Our yin and yang is way out. There's no balance here. it's all just mushed up together, and especially when that text overlays the backdrop. But by breaking up the content areas into multiple text blocks, it gives us more options. And we'll come back and revisit this section in just a moment. But first up, though, it means that we can indeed remove that section entirely, meaning that we can bring these up, meaning that our image doesn't need to zoom crop so much. Also meaning that that's going to be a higher resolution, or at least a better looking image over top of the text area. Now this isn't fixed yet. Don't panic about that. Okay. Next up, I think we're going to solve this issue here. And so here we're going to duplicate it once more. Move it out of the way for now. We'll come back to that. And I don't think we need 3 paragraphs for this section. If this was to go on a home page, we'd want it short and sweet. And to the point. Maybe that's why I just said that. Okay, let's bring that text box, a bounding box up. So now this is one small compact text block. It's looking better. We can then use a call to action dedicated to that section. This can then take you to a page which shows more information about that was already on this page. But it makes this section far more compact and easier to follow. We can then get rid of all of that top section. Oops, a bit wild there. Just do it a bit at a time. Move this bounding box up. Drop it in there, and now we can duplicate that button and add another call to action below that text block. Double click on it and contact us. And we're going to add a little bit more breathing space below. So now we've got 2 call to actions on this left-hand side. We can bring our image up even further. Now it's starting to take shape. However, still not happy with this. I think we can do better. So I'm going to bring that in to give a bit more breathing space around this. And the reason there's extra space here will be apparent in just a moment. Because what we're going to do now is add a background behind that text. And we're going to go with large padding. So even though that's brought the image down again, that's just because it's brought this box as well. It's thinking ahead, trying to be clever, and doesn't quite get what we're trying to do here. So that's fine. We can just repair that. I'm not blown away by this, but this just gives you an example of how we can make it look better. Okay, here's another example. We're going to add that around there, and we're going to add another background for this section here. We're going to have our contact button feeding off the bottom of it too. And we're going to bring that image down a tiny bit. I'm going to bring that out so we've got a nice consistency on that right-hand side. This is not my best work, but in just 10-15 minutes, hopefully it's shown you how we can take a design and make it more balanced on the page. Something that could easily be broken down into mobile and work. So we've taken from that, we've applied our principles of design. So let's go through them. Measure twice, cut once. Okay, I didn't really plan ahead, but then I've been doing this for 20 years. In your case, you're better off wireframing this layout, then adding your content in, and then seeing how it fits, and then fine-tuning it afterwards. So that would tick that box, but I went on my own intuition based on experience. So you could say I've measured so many times in my life, I don't even need to measure now. I know to the nearest millimeter how that area should be. If you're starting out, don't do what I do there. Then we go on to our spaceman. We've got some nice spacing around the elements. There's more spacing here. We could work on it to get it more the same. There's actually nothing wrong with that. And now we've got equidistant spacing either side of this image. We've got generally the same spacing above and below, although things like the gaps between the heading and the top of the box and the fact that there is a background on this one and there isn't on this one means that if they're identical, they'll look off anyway, just from the optical illusion aspect of it. But generally, there's some nice broad breathing space around the content, so Spaceman is happy. Then we look at yin and yang, and we've got high contrast. So no longer do we have the text overlapping a background image and it being lost there. We are using the background shapes and background options for our text blocks, for example, to make sure our text is easy to read at all stages, making it accessible. Then if we look at the next principle, which would be consistency is key, there's a consistent flow. The fonts carry through the colors. So this color here carries through there and there. There's contrast with the white. But generally, it's a pretty basic layout, but it works from consistency perspective as well. Let's have a look at what else we've got here. Spotlight. We are drawn in. This is one area where we could argue that the spotlight isn't quite clear enough. Maybe there needs to be something pointing towards it. But the way I see it, and it'd be interesting to see if you see the same, is I look at that heading 1, and that's where I'm drawn to. And that's why I deliberately added as that subheading, that was a heading 1, because it's drawing you away from the heading 1. So not only is that good from a hierarchical perspective and for that spotlight, also we shouldn't be using a heading 1 on more than one page. So if you already spotted that, you get extra brownie points for that as well. We should only be using a heading 1 once, mainly because that's how Google knows to that the title's usually the most important content within the page. It also is great for accessibility readers, so the person using that reader will know that the breakdown and flow of content in the site. And if you've got multiple heading 1s, then we've got multiple priority 1 text, which is bonkers. There's only one. We can prioritize different things on different pages, but on a single page, we need to have that hierarchy of heading 1 used once per page, heading 2s, 3s. You usually find a heading 3 within a heading 2. So normally you would see a heading 2 here, and then if you were to have another heading in this section, that would be the heading 3. If there's a real reason for it, we can sometimes get away with breaking that rule. But generally, Spotlight, we are drawn into this heading 1 as being the most important area of the page, whilst with this one, no idea where to look. Okay, what else have we got? Consistency is key. We've been through that one. Rhythm and beat, I think it's hard to see if that's the case in just one section, but we can see the rhythm from this text to this text to this text all built into the same theme. There's a consistency and a rhythm, again, to how these buttons are laid out. So I think we probably pass the test there as well. Content is king. Now, this is placeholder text, so obviously it's not going to be the same, but when we put our content in here and space out like this, it's going to have more impact and clarity and definitely more clout than this text here. So again, another tick there as well. So yeah, I think we've been through all of our principles. We've got that working. I'm just going to jump over now for a couple of minutes onto our mobile view. And before we do anything else, we just need to save it. The benefit of this one is it works better out of the box. There's less to do on mobile view, but because it goes over top of a full section background image, we're losing that text, and that was an absolute mess. So I'm just going to remove that section. We're going to remove the spacer that we put in, and we're just going to focus on our main content. Now, this would depend on what content's going in this section. So for example, here, in fact, I think it was if we can get away with one of these being an intro paragraph, we could do that. Alternatively, I'm going to assume that we can't, that the order of content needs to match exactly. So let's bring this down. Bring a call to action in place. Again, we can go full width with that button. It doesn't matter as long as on mobile view we keep that same consistency carrying through it. And let's bring this section down as well. But the difference here is we don't need that image to be anywhere near as deep, so we can just move it up. So there's a little bit of messing around to do here. I'm going to bring both of those elements. Nice breathing space below it. Make sure the container height isn't longer than it needs to be, just so we're not messing around with this in future, trying to get it to work on mobile view. And all the changes we're making so far, apart from things like aligning the text, which will affect both desktop and mobile, but changing the size and position of each of these elements is individual to either desktop or mobile. Okay. There we go. So that layout's now working on desktop, it's working on mobile. And I think we're about there. So just to recap what we've covered in this live session, we've taken our designs, our principles of design, tried to explain it in a memorable way so we can have these in the back of our mind when we're designing. This is the best stuff I could ever teach you, because it's the difference between not, okay, if you take a 3-year graphic design degree, you're going to be on much further ahead than someone who is just watching this video. But a lot of the elements on here are just drilled in over a long period of time in universities, and understanding all of these aspects by looking at examples, being a student of the game and just getting out there and looking at all of this information. But if you can look at it through the lens of principles of design with things like Spaceman, Spotlight, consistency is key, and a pirate all in the back of your mind, one, you'll never grow up, and two, you will hopefully be able to make better connections. Hope you found this really helpful. As I said, I'm looking to create more live sessions over the coming weeks. I also want to create this into a mini course where we roll this out and break it down into more focused chapters, as opposed to me just doing it all off the top of my head. And just keep an eye out, because I think that'll be launched probably this autumn. But I can promise you that this will really work for you. And if you want more information from us, we've got our YouTube channel and there's loads of tutorials on there. That's both the Website Builders channel, which you're on now, and the Pixel Haze community channel, and the Pixel Haze Web Designers channel, if I can get that right, which is more of a focus on a broader perspective. We are going to be bringing in more Canva tutorials, because that's just what a lot of our students are asking for at the moment. Just principles of design, which is not asking for, but I know are essential, tied in with things like Canva workshops to show how we can make these easy to do and easy to update, easy to use, I suppose, going forward. We are launching our communities over on SKOOL, that's SKOOL with a K. It's really exciting because I think this is one of the fastest growing education platforms, and I've been playing around with it for a few months now, and I found SKOOL really addictive in a good way, and also I think it's definitely the future of education. And so we're going feet first, all in on SKOOL. We have two communities there: Website Builders community, which is $15 a month. And for that, you will get these live sessions as and when they come out. You'll have the opportunity to ask me questions directly through the community. But the aim is that you take all of those teachings and take it in your own direction and you self-learn with it. If you need more hands-on wraparound support, including an onboarding session with me, a personalized plan for your own journey into creating better designs or getting your website live, or even a career in web design, we've got Pixel Haze Community, which is currently on an offer, but it will be going up to $97 within the next couple of weeks. That's $97 per month. It's a lot cheaper than what I could ever do in one-to-one tuition, and you get the added value of working alongside people in the community with you. I'll leave some links in the description. Go and check them out. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Cheers.